The Nigerian government recently evacuated over 1,000 stranded Nigerian migrants from Libya, and the process is ongoing. That delegation was led by Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyama, and was also on a fact-finding mission and to ultimately secure the release of Nigerian migrants in Libya. Now the returnees are going through profiling covering medicals, skills acquisition, value mindset reorientation, and other concerns. Let's take a listen to the reports that gave us and brought us up to speed on the return from Libya by the returnees.
The Libyan government has made it clear that they share the same values, and what we went there and we saw, they gave us full cooperation, to be very, very fair to them. The president of Libya received us, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Justice. They gave us full access to the camps. It's true, there are Libyans, and they themselves admit that there are Libyans, just like there are Nigerians even in Libya, engaged in criminality, who are trafficking in Nigerians. This, there's no doubt. But the government itself is doing everything it can.
How many have returned so far?
493.
But how many totally are we expecting to be brought in at the end of the entire
I think Honorable Minister has explained that it's a continuous process. We have technical team there going into loop and corners of Libya to get out all Nigerians that are trapped there. So this is the situation.
And we're going to start counseling them, and then we'll rehabilitate them and see how we can reintegrate them back into the society. We're going to give them different kinds of skills in collaboration with other government agencies that offer such programs so that they can be back on their feet.
Rehabilitation program already going on for them. So as soon as these returnees arrive, we have to counsel them. After counseling, we rehabilitate them through skill acquisition, jobs, and small loans for businesses. So they are all going to be settled. There are some who want to go back to school, and they will be assisted to go back to school as well.
We have the Nigerian Returnees Empowerment Scheme of the Federal Government of Nigeria. This is being distributed to everybody under the office SSA Diaspora. They will look through these skills, decide which of the skills they want to acquire.
After all this, kudos to the Nigerian government, but is that the solution to addressing the global problem on migration? On the program today, we would be looking at the way forward to resolving this problem globally. What should and how should nations collaborate to stem these challenges? My guest is Professor Leonard Fua, a professor of international relations, senior research fellow at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS. Professor Fua is former Vice Chancellor of Bingham University, Nigeria. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Diplomatic Ties.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Our focus once again is to take a look at what really will be the way forward. Is it about bringing returnees back to our various countries in Africa, in other climes in the world, or how well can nations in the world collaborate to stem the challenge of migration after this time out? Welcome to Diplomatic Ties.
And we're doing our best to make it as convenient and easy as possible for prospective students.
What we can do is just support the efforts of West African countries to integrate, to organize a better regional, political and economic integration.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Diplomatic Ties, building friendship and enhancing oneness among nations. Watch Diplomatic Ties on NTA International.
From the look of things globally, it looks as though every country takes their own individual positions. We're not even looking at maybe West Africa taking of the way of forward, or Africa. So what can be done for the global community to look at and solve the challenge of migration holistically?
First and foremost, let me appreciate the effort put in place by the federal government for bringing these ones that have strayed away from Nigeria for several years back home, and the measures being taken by federal government. But to also say that what is happening today is of a grave worry to international community. The issue about migration today is you begin to ask the question, what is the pull factor or what is the push factor? Where did we miss it globally? The refugee and migrants are becoming major issues today, particularly moving from Africa through the Mediterranean to Europe. The entire European system is confused. The entire American system is confused. The entire African system is confused. And so we need a multilateral agreements to be able to stem the tide of this migration issue. It has become a modern slavery today. Why are people leaving their countries to other countries today? Is it poverty? You ask a question. Is it that the countries have lost faith, or the citizens have lost faith in their country? That causes serious concern concerning our social security policy in this country and in Africa as a whole. And if you want to put it globally, we must begin to look at our social security and our welfare system. We must begin to look at our institutions. We must begin to look at the policies that are set on ground by the government. But to put this thing up, the international community is looking at an innovative measures or strategy or policies that can stem the tide of this modern slavery, this inhumanity of man to man. Why are people from Nigeria, for instance, why are people from Africa selling or requiring to get these ones to transport them to Europe or to other places, particularly to the Mediterranean, onward to Europe and other places? Are they looking for greener pastures? What is it that is lacking in this country? That is where the strategy and the policies will now begin to think about.
Okay,
and then
we'll actually come to Nigeria. I'm looking at, you just talked about coming up with innovation to stem in this.
Yeah.
As a professor of international relations, and you're widely traveled, you have addressed so many seminars, symposiums, conferences, what should be the way forward? Because it looks like I said that individual continents, individual countries are looking to their own, solving their own problem, but the global community has not come to say, how can we handle this?
No, I
there
think,
has been so much talk and no solution.
I think there is a work towards international organizations, either multilaterally or bilaterally, and also regional organization and sub-regional organization coming together. They are putting a framework on the ground in which these policies and strategies will have to be married together. How can we stem the tide of this? Today, the UN, the AU, the ECOWAS, and to some extent the Arab League or what have you, are working towards putting in policies that would be sacrosanct to each of these countries. And they're trying to see that towards an idea of putting in a conference. I would be attending a conference in June under the auspices of European International Study Association, where I'm supposed to be presenting something for Africa
on migration,
the changing dynamics of migration.
Okay.
The refugee and immigrants to Europe. It's becoming a burden to them. And there must be a legislation that is going to put binding on all the states and also the international organization joining together. It's going to be a multi-billion naira approach because it will require large sums of money to be able to put this thing on the ground. What are we going to put in place, for instance, in Africa? What immigration policies are we going to put in place, for instance, in Africa, crossing over to Europe? What policies are the European nations going to put? Because it's a world without border today. And if we have to be our brother's keepers, and if we have to be in a global setting, there must be framework that would be able to accommodate those moving for genuine cause and those moving because they are running away from either war or displacement or what have you. Most of these migrants is either they are running away from poverty, they are running away from either displacement, or they are running away from a religious crisis, or some of these things.
We'll come to that. Why would some countries appear very unreceptive when these migrants on transit have problems? For instance, Catholic Pontiff Pope Francis has said that everybody is a migrant.
Yeah.
You just said you'll be somewhere in June, right?
Yes.
You're going to be a migrant at that point.
Yes, at that
but
point.
But
Yes.
then the definition will be either you're illegal or an illegal migrant, or a proper or an irregular migrant. So why would some countries be very impervious or unreceptive to migrants who find themselves in trouble along the route?
Of recent, we had this global instability, global insecurity, due mainly to this crisis that we see, either from the war-torn areas or either from a failing state. And so a lot of countries don't have the wherewithal to manage these resources. And a lot of them also from past history of the implication of this issue of refugee and migrants, they don't want to take. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the wherewithal. And particularly with the issue of ISIS, or you call them ISO or someone, that is now the issue. No country wants to be blown. Of recent, we had of several countries who are facing this immigrant issue, blowing up shops, blowing up of this, killing and so forth. And so a lot of countries are being cautioned. If they are sovereign nation, they have the right to do whatever they are doing to be able to protect themselves and protect. Each country protects its own citizen. Yes, you have the right to come in because everybody is a migrant, but there must be policies. For instance, the United States is telling you until we put the wall around us, we will not be secured to put any policy on the ground. That's Trump for you. But we are saying that there must be a framework and there must be a reason why somebody will migrate from one place to another. And if those ones are genuine, for instance, they are pushed as a result of war and what have you, there must be a framework and there must be where they should be kept and what number should be taken by each state.
Yeah, during wars and during some emergencies, maybe earthquake and name other calamities, it's understandable that even when we sit, if we hear a bang now, we'll need to move naturally. Yes. That's understandable. But where people just leave their country for no crisis, nothing that warrants them to move that way, what would have been responsible?
Yeah,
before we go to the rudiments now.
The truth about it is that people move because they're looking for greener pastures. Once the policies here are not favorable to them, they have to move to a much more better place to look for a living. This is why the international community is trying to see the labor migration laws. What is a country doing that is not doing well? And these are some of the innovative mechanisms we're talking about.
Sometimes Germany thought about planting projects in Africa, mostly Nigeria and some other countries that are vulnerable to people moving in droves without no just major reason. And Nigeria was in the picture. They felt if they put up some projects that come up with some kind of alternative livelihood option, it may reduce that. Can that solve the problem?
That is one of the options today that the international community is trying to put forward. We are not subscribing to you coming up there. They are now calling on all well-meaning people who have the resources. For instance, you are talking about orphanages and what have you, like orphanages, like schools and other things. They would prefer to come down to Africa and put up all these structures where they would provide the resources, provide the wherewithal for the community. They call it a community project, community-based project, where, for instance, if you have these migrants, they are kept in some communities in their countries, where these resources are provided, where schools are open within those areas, where things like some infrastructural provisions are made there for handiwork or something of that sort. This is the innovative methods that they are trying to put in place. But the truth about it is that is leadership ready? Are countries ready to utilize those resources to meet the teeming requirement of these people? This is their fear. Some who have seen just the recent example of Boko Haram issue in just the northeast part of the country. Distribution has become a major issue. And some would prefer to remain refugees for life than to go out there, to go to the farm where they are not certain. They will not be blown by somebody. And so they would continue to depend on government for this. Can government sustain it? Can well-meaning people from abroad or outside Nigeria or outside Africa continue to give out these resources without meeting the needs of the people they want to meet?
I understand there are peculiarities within every continent, or just like we say within every country. Is there anything the AU can do as a kind of an agenda within Africa before launching to United Nations?
I'm sure the AU can do something, but almost every African country is faced by crisis today. And when you begin to talk about AU, you are talking about funding. Are countries meeting their funding requirements to the AU today? Let's be realistic. They have to fund the peace effort. They have to fund crisis. They have to fund the issue of refugee and migrants. They have to fund the issue of disease and everything. So if you look around us, a lot of issues require funding. Can countries meet this obligation? That's the first question. Even if the AU is willing to do that, can they meet the requirement of the raising tide of this migration problem?
While addressing the Nigerian media on return to Nigeria, the head of the delegation that led the federal government team to Libya, Minister of Foreign Affairs Jeffrey Onyama, sustained one position that they receive a lot of cooperation from the Libyan government, but the Libyan government on the other side said their problem back home is the problem of the militia, who are also capitalizing on the migrant problem to cause more problems, and that is the problem. So what can be done to penetrate this ring? While solutions are being looked for, they are compounding the problem.
The truth about it is that Africa must find a way of solving this Libyan issue. There must be stability. The governance in Libya must be put in place, because that's one. Without good governance in place, these militias will continue to do that, because everyone wants to have to be known. When it comes to leadership, everybody wants to lead. And except we get
Welcome to Diplomatic Ties.
And we're doing our best to make it as convenient and easy as possible for prospective students.
What we can do is just support the efforts of West African countries to integrate, to organize a better regional, political and economic integration.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Diplomatic Ties, building friendship and enhancing oneness among nations. Watch Diplomatic Ties on NTA International.
Is there anything that can be done around the Mediterranean axis and Libya to ward off this? Because those are that is major hope.
honestly, until we were able to put in, international community is able to put in a better legislation that would meet the needs of countries and that would also enhance dialogue.
If they put up a better legislation and not all the nations of the world will want to endorse, because they have to endorse it. What
Sometimes
happens?
you don't need all the nations. You can never find consensus when it comes to endorsing a certain law. But when you have at least 70% of these countries accepting it, it is binding on other countries, whether they like it or not. And then the principles of good faith in Article 24 of the Law of Treaties said everything must be done in good faith. the principles of Patterson Savanda. Once you're doing it in good faith, you don't need to have 100% or 90%. If you have 70, 75% of countries accepting that, I think with good usage, we would adhere to the rules and regulations that guides the movement in and out of countries.
How soon can we get this right? Because it's becoming a major, in short, will I be right to say United Nations, it's time for them to declare an emergency on migration in the world?
No, I think the migration issue has become an emergency issue, which nations are trying to find. I'm telling you, just like I said, we would be meeting in somewhere in Holland or Netherlands in June. We have series of this meeting, not less than 5 that will be coming between June to September this year alone, talking about migration, talking about modern slavery, talking about how to stem the tide or prevent this inhumanity of man to man.
If entrepreneurship is encouraged in Nigeria, will migration not be discouraged? Judging from Mr. President's
I think this is one of the solutions to migration issue. Even when I was a vice chancellor in the university, I had tried that in the 2nd and 3rd year of whatever course you are running, we had put in place entrepreneurship so that you don't just read books and get out with a certificate. Once you are leaving the university, you should be able to use your hand and your head to do something. And this is what we're encouraging every university system to do. Not just university system, polytechnics and other tertiary institutions. And we're also talking well-meaning Nigerians to set up industries, cottage industries and so forth, so that Nigerians can have something to do. Kagame has the right to do that. If you go back to Rwanda and see what Rwanda is, as if it's not a country that came out of the ruins of war. Beautiful a country, putting in infrastructures for entrepreneurship for the locals.
But this charge was given by the president of Nigeria to Nigerians. Why they should not look elsewhere, but review your personal economy, and you can use that to move on.
Well, leadership can sustain that. If he has said that, why can't we put our home in order? Honestly, we have said this time without number, and we cannot overemphasize it, that you don't have any nation today or any country today that looks better than Nigeria. We have all the wherewithal. The eggheads, we have them. The human resource we have. The natural resources we have. What is killing them in Europe and America? It's not killing us here. We have the best weather, we have the best soil, we have everything that it takes.
So why do people move in droves to these places?
Probably governance. Maybe we should call our leaders to order. Leadership must begin to take responsibility. Leadership must begin to see citizens as their responsibility. It's a social contract. We have said this. If you're there at the top, somebody elected you there, and you must represent the person that elected you there. And citizens must begin to be educated that they have the right to call to call whoever is sitting there as a senator or as a reps member or as a president, because they elected him.
Okay.
But the truth about it is that everybody must take responsibility. We must be our brother's keeper. We must come out with feasible programs that Nigerians can put their hands and have to earn a living wage. And we must also begin to review this issue that is killing us today. I am from the north, I am from the south, I am from there, I'm from there. Why don't we look at the Nigerian project together? And once you know,
can the change agents model work? Meaning, maybe the appropriate agencies or institutions adopt the change agents method, maybe getting migrants or people who have been trafficked, using them as the people to preach to these ones who intend to or who have done it and they are back.
I think it will work, but the truth about it is that, are we going to sustain what we are doing?
Okay.
The change agencies are there, the ones that have gone and have seen it. Are we sure the government can sustain what it's doing beyond 6 or 7 months? Or maybe after this regime, would there be continuity?
Governance to continue.
But did we have it over the years? Somebody may come and tell you this is not his program.
Do Nigerians have a role to play in this too?
Honestly, the government can't do this alone. It must begin from homes. Where did we miss the
As we speak,
ethics?
well, thank you so much, Professor Leonard Foy. It was nice talking with you on Diplomatic Ties today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our thought of discourse today has been on the way forward to stemming the tide or surmounting the problem of migration globally. We looked at it from the global scene. What can be done? We came down to the continent, Africa. Can Africa do something? And we came down home. A lot has been done by the federal government, but like my guest said, it is all about you and the government. It's not government alone. And if nothing else, we should try and revert back to what we used to have, the communal nature of Nigeria. Maybe that could help. Well, that's about that on Diplomatic Ties today. Always there on the program as we bring you issues, turning issues in the world that enhances relations between nations of the world. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Welcome to Diplomatic Ties.
And we're doing our best to make it as convenient and easy as possible for prospective students.
What we can do is just support the efforts of West African countries to integrate, to organize a better regional, political and economic integration.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Diplomatic Ties, building friendship and enhancing oneness among nations. Watch Diplomatic Ties on NTA International.